Hey, 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 welcome back to Trek Chat, a podcast brought to you by Trek on the Tube. I am your usual host, Sean, and I am joined today by two esteemed guests, two wonderful guests, the usual, the traditional, it's boring. It's always the same guest, no, I'm kidding. Starfleet Boy, how you doing? Thank you so much for being here yet again.
Thank you for having me on, and I'm glad that I've become boring and routine. Thanks, that was nice. No, I'm just kidding.
We also have a wonderful guest over from the Trek Culture team. Paul, how you doing?
Good. I'm happy to be the unusual guest.
All right. Today we're not doing a podcast or a complete episode in French. We're sticking to English. We're talking in the language of my audience.
Yeah, I feel really good that we're
audience.
following that episode because you can only go up from that French episode, in my opinion.
How kind! How kind! You didn't even listen to it. I'm sure. No,
I
did.
I listened to it. I didn't understand anything you were saying, but I heard like je vais, je vais, and all that.
Did you listen to the whole thing?
No,
or some of it.
10 minutes, okay. 15 minutes tops.
I'd just like to.
It's not bad.
I'd like to point out that English is Federation standard, apparently. So, and French is a dead language in Star Trek.
That's right. It's how did Data put it? He basically said it was a dead language. Yeah. So yeah. So screw French. We're talking English here. That's how it is. And today we're going to be talking about character arcs in Star Trek, the franchise, not just shows, because now we have character arcs that span over multiple different shows and over years and years and years. And good ones, bad ones, ones that kind of interest us, or maybe ones that we would want to see. Paul, put you on the spot. Do you have anyone in particular that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about like the first character arc that comes to mind chronologically. I think is Worf's character arc on TNG. I think that starting with God, now I'm losing. Is it? It's the one where they go to the Klingon planet in the third season.
Oh yeah. Not the one where he's a Shadish. I should know this. We just watched TNG like very recently and talked about it. But anyways, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's really sad that I can't remember. But Worf's arc with his discommendation through the Klingon Civil War, to me, that's like the most prominent arc in TNG, and to my memory, the earliest arc that I can remember.
Yeah, I think that was like the earliest, like I guess like the intentional arc, right? Because could you count Spock? Spock is who I think about because he's in like everything except Voyager and Enterprise.
Yeah,
but that's not like
I mean, everything counts as character arcs, but it wasn't like intentional in the sense that every new season or every new film that came out just expanded on his story.
Whereas it became that, but like it didn't start out that way.
It's also not particularly coherent. Whereas the Worf storyline, at least in TNG, a little bit through Deep Space Nine, though I think Deep Space Nine kind of restarts a new arc for the guy. That's the closest to like a modern story arc, again, that I can remember. TOS definitely didn't have anything like that. And you can contrive a story arc for Spock, what with, saving the ship and the Wrath of Khan and then, being resurrected. And you can cobble a story arc together, but the way they handled
is it Sins of the Father?
It's Sins of the Father, yeah.
With the whole Romulan thing.
Yeah, and I mean, like that even. I mean, it's not just Worf, because like it, they kind of carry that storyline into. My God, I can't think of any of these episode names now on the spot, but the one
that's the effect of Trek Chat. That's the Trek Chat effect.
The one where they brainwash Geordi, and then it, that feeds into Redemption.
Well, I'm not good with episode names, episode titles.
Poor Geordi's been tortured a lot on TNG, so it's easy for you to like blend them in. But yeah, it's the one. It's the first time they're messing with his visor, where they like make him. Like they can make him kill, basically.
It's like the Manchurian
like, is that
candidate?
The one? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he spills the drink instead or something. It's like
yeah, he does do that.
I remember that.
By extension, we get Alexander's story arc as well, but that's a bit more disconnected.
But that is part of
than Worf's actual story.
That is part of the discommendation arc, though. At least because it's. You get Kalar in Reunion coming aboard with Alexander, and you've got Duras and Gowron being introduced.
It's a really good. I feel like you we can't talk about anything else except Worf now because like that's a really good one. And he spans like 2 shows, a TOS movie, like through his Colonel Worf, his great, like there's so much Worf, so much like enriching of that storyline, and the Kittimer, it's tied into Kittimer. That's cool.
Yeah,
I feel like he grows a lot more in Deep Space Nine as a character, though, because Deep Space Nine feels like they're growing Worf the character, whereas TNG feels like they kind of, I guess, to some certain extent, using Worf as a tool to elaborate and enrich the Klingon culture as a whole.
No,
right?
I disagree. I think he's one of the rare exceptions where like a character is so focused on, especially later seasons. I feel like Worf's popularity like just grew, and so I felt like there were a lot of Worf centric stories. I feel like he had an arc.
yeah. I think his
in
personal
TNG.
life
like character arc. Yeah,
in TNG is his personal life is more. It gets more focused than some kind of like Worf sci-fi story. It's if they're going to do a Worf story, it's generally about his relationship with Alexander or his relationship with the other crew, and he doesn't like play too prominently in the major sci-fi stories so much.
Well, it's mostly about like cultural stories and adapting to like different lifestyles, I guess, or like embracing his past, embracing his present. Those are the kind of stories that they go in. They don't go into like high sci-fi concepts with Worf.
Right.
You don't think turning into a crustacean and de-evolving is a a sci-fi concept?
That's not a Worf episode.
But that's not a Worf specific thing, though.
No, it's true. I know. I just wanted to throw that one in there because I love it.
At the risk of being hated upon, I also quite enjoyed the Deanna Worf relationship. I'm one of those people. I thought that wasn't bad.
Yeah, that was bad.
Well, you disagree with that. You disagree.
It's because of Jadzia. It's Jadzia.
Is it? No, you disagree because it's Imzadi, don't you?
Right. Yeah. Also that. Yeah. She and Riker, I feel like work better for me. But
before their Nepenthe in Star Trek Picard, I was adamantly opposed to the two of them being married. I thought that was like the weakest, easiest storytelling. That they couldn't just be friends with this past. They had to be like star-crossed lovers or meant to be.
Right.
But Nepenthe kind of. That sold it for me. They work perfectly.
Nice.
Their wedding in Nemesis didn't consolidate the fact that they were together.
I mean, it did, but like I could see how you could think they would get divorced later, like Han and Leia did.
No, I just didn't think they should get married at all. Like I thought that
at all.
I thought that misunderstood the characters. Like I thought that they had just become such close friends that they didn't need to be in a romantic relationship anymore.
Yeah, they were like young love, but then they grew out of it in a sense, and now they have their own lives.
Yeah. Though, I mean, it does make perfect sense that they'd get back together later in life. It just, for me, just didn't seem necessary in Nemesis, but most of Nemesis wasn't necessary.
Well, Picard did a good job at like kind of picking up the pieces on that.
With everyone, really. I mean...
It's a prelude to like TNG or to Nemesis.
You mean like an epilogue?
Epilogue,
sorry,
that's
my bad. My bad. Yes, Kira is. She's not my favorite character in all of Star Trek, but Kira is probably one of the characters that I think of immediately when I think of like big character arcs in Star Trek.
Yeah, oh, interesting.
I feel like she grew so much from that first season to like the last one. Granted, it might be because they got better at writing her and because the performance was so good. But I feel like Kira grew so much.
I'm not complete with Voyager, but I'm really interested in 709 and her arc and how it'll pan out throughout the show.
What does that mean? You're not complete with Voyager?
Yeah, I know. So I like. So when Voyager aired, I was like a poo-pooer. I was like, no, this is not my Star Trek. Like, they've gone too far.
So,
hashtag not my Trek.
What are they gonna do?
You're a Star Trek YouTuber and you haven't watched all of Voyager?
Yeah, I haven't finished. I'm on the journey. I just finished Enterprise. I had to detour and finish Enterprise because Earl Grey Trekkie was super excited about it. So shout out to him.
Unsubscribe.
But now I'm going back to Voyager. I enjoy it. I enjoy Voyager. I'm not like one of those people that dislike it anymore. But at the time, so here's what happened to me with Voyager. I was like DS9 and Voyager. I didn't finish when they aired for two reasons. One, like I got into like I became like 21, 22 around that age. And so like my priorities shifted from like I guess I got cool all of a sudden, and so my priorities shifted to like going out to clubs and like dating boys and stuff like that, and so I stopped watching Star Trek altogether. But also I was just like over it. I was like, no, I wanted an Enterprise based TV show. Like I wanted the next generation of the next generation. So I was like, I don't care about Voyager or Deep Space Nine. So afterwards, like years later, people were like, you're an idiot, like you should watch Deep Space Nine. So I bought the whole DVD collection and watched Deep Space Nine, and I loved it. And then I bought season 1 through 3 of Voyager, and I meant to watch it, but then other stuff happened and I never did. And now streaming's here, and so now I'm gonna finally finish Voyager.
I mean, you're just so late. It's shocking to me. I mean, like Voyager.
Yes, it's terrible. It's really bad. It's true.
I mean, Voyager was like one of the most watched shows on Netflix. That's not really accounting for its quality, which I don't think it's a very good show. But I mean, I just don't know anybody, even non-Star Trek fans, who hasn't seen Voyager.
And I hadn't seen Enterprise.
It is the most
rewatched.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about stats that I saw a few years ago. This is when Discovery was beginning. They had stats on Netflix showing that Voyager was the most rewatched show on Netflix. Everyone was going back and rewatching Voyager. Yeah. Maybe because they didn't see it like you, I don't know, or maybe because everyone wanted to give it a second chance.
I remember it being to folks that were younger than myself, like my cousins who were younger, my friends who had little brothers. Those guys were mad into Voyager for various reasons. It was a Star Trek show. It was cool. It used to air on Spike or something like that. And then, of course, the objectification of, 7 of 9 with the thing, like, what teenage kid, who identifies heterosexual isn't going to be like, oh my gosh, what's going on? What's happening to me? When they see her.
Or when they see Kate Mulgrew submerged in bubbles in a bathtub with just her shoulders exposed. Exactly. They're like, oh, what's this?
That's like too much. That's too much. It's true. But yeah, Seven's character is my favorite so far. I really like her, and I'm really curious, because I like her in Picard, so I'm missing information from what happened.
So we have to talk about this again once you've finished Voyager.
You can spoil it. There's no spoil clause after someone who hasn't seen it for 30 years.
It's just that you can't counter argue because I feel like Picard, as it stands currently, has kind of undone some of the work that Voyager did in regards to Seven's character.
I think that's a hard disagree on my part, but please go on.
Oh wow.
No, I'm glad I brought this up now.
Oh yes, I then again, one could argue, life isn't, I suppose, unidirectional. Like the growth that you're going to go on isn't just like in one set path. But I feel like Seven she's basically a sociopath. She's really crazy. In Voyager, she's always got those radical solutions. She wants to space this person. She wants to blow up the ship. You know what I mean? But Janeway's always kind of holding her back and trying to help her find her humanity. And
she doesn't seem psycho so far, like in season 5. Just FYI.
Well, she's not screaming at people and what have you, but she's very kind of extreme.
I see her as someone who's but I see her as someone who's like struggling, and then who hasn't had. Like who kind of similar to Burnham and to Paul, like they're being exposed to humanity in a way, which is like daunting, or it's like kind of like not daunting, but it's troubling. It can be troubling if you're not used to emotions and expressing them in that way.
But in that sense, I've always seen Janeway as like her mother or a mother figure to her, and I feel like how she's become or what she's become in Picard would be something that would very much disappoint Janeway, because I feel like Janeway would still be very Starfleet. She wouldn't be on board with this Fenris Rangers thing at all. And so, yeah, that's where I stand on that.
What if you found out, like in season 2 of Picard, that Janeway's actually like the source, the funding source, like the founder?
I would be blasting Terry Matalas, be like, "Yo, wow, you better justify this." I mean, if it's well written, it's fine.
But I actually think that's a pretty interesting idea, but I think I would be more interested in just seeing an episode or even like a novel about how Seven and Janeway parted ways or fell out, or and Sean, what you said about it not being like a linear trajectory from Voyager to Picard, I think is part of the point of Picard, is that things that you expect, like the way these people's lives have turned out is not what you would necessarily expect, but is relatively realistic for a sci-fi, franchise like Star Trek.
Well, they're in space, they're in the future. There's like infinite possibilities, right, of how life can. They've got much more possibilities than what we have, I suppose, stuck on Earth today.
Yeah, and I just think that Seven becoming a Fenris Ranger rather than being a Starfleet officer makes sense to me with the way Starfleet's portrayed in Picard. That people like Picard and Seven might have become disillusioned with it, and so they they go about saving the galaxy in other ways, or Picard retires and then decides to save the galaxy. But
I could be sold on this. Like, if they really did a 7 of 9 spinoff or like a Fenris Rangers show, because I would love a Fenris Rangers show that kind of dives into, I suppose, this no man's land that exists now where the Romulan Empire used to be. And I would love that. And if they were to give us flashbacks into how kind of Seven transitioned from who she was to who she is now, maybe that would like kind of help me along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a 7 of 9 spinoff show would be. I mean, obviously, everybody would watch that. But I mean, like this is off topic, but I mean, doesn't it feel like new Star Trek right now? Every other episode, you think to yourself, or somebody says on Twitter, "I want to spin off about that." Like, where does it end?
That's so true.
No, I agree.
So true.
I agree. It's because I feel like before you would watch one episode and you'd be like, well, that was an amazing episode. But now with this like kind of expanding franchise, cinematic universe world that we live in, it's like every episode of every show could like become its own thing. Like, oh, why don't we follow these characters on this planet? Why don't we follow this that's going on?
Do you think that that's because the writing is flawed and you're not satisfied with what they're presenting, or that it's like too superficial, so they're not giving you like enough of it to like make that satisfying, complete story? Is that what that is?
Yeah, I think everything's kind of
That
a
could be
tease.
it.
There's a little bit of a tease quality to
yeah.
everything. But these are ongoing shows.
So Navarre in Discovery could be a prime example of that. Like, we go to Navarre, but we don't go to Navarre. We just kind of hover over it and have one ceremony on the Discovery,
Yeah.
and then we leave.
I mean,
And so we don't know what happened. We don't know who's there, what's going on. It would be interesting to dive into that.
I think it's hard to tell exactly, but these are ongoing shows, so we don't have the benefit of like seeing what the ultimate story is. But yeah, these things are, I feel like shows in general today plant a bunch of like seeds, but then nothing becomes of them. But then again, TNG wasn't trying to be serialized or tell like a grand story per se, but
TNG planted the literal seed of all the species.
But I feel like even DS9 might have planted some seeds in season 1 and 2 that they never, nourished or whatnot. I think in large part it does depend on the reaction of, especially more so today, whether this is like something that like is admitted or not. Oh wow, we got a raised hand raise. Go ahead, Paul. I didn't have a real point.
No. I'm sorry. I thought that was the mute button.
Oh, that's
no. I've got a siren going off behind me, so
he was trying to mute
myself.
That's what he was doing.
That's so funny. You believed me. No, the mute button's the little microphone. Press it now. Oh, that's what the sirens were.
Yeah.
Nice,
Okay.
That's funny.
Well, you can cut that part out.
He literally called the police on you. Your point was so flawed.
That was awesome.
So
no, but I guess ultimately what I was trying to say is that we'll have to see and judge them truly when the shows have ended. Like, I feel like, because that's part of my problem with in general, just like, those of us who are really into doing this, like, I'm always guessing what's going to happen, and so there's that piece of it that, like, I think sometimes later on when you see how it all ends, oh yeah, maybe Navarre wasn't that important, in the grand scheme. Like, maybe the payoff is worth the sacrifice of not knowing more about Navarre or whatever.
Yeah, I don't want to be too hard on Discovery or Picard because they are kind of in their infancy. At the same time, TV shows don't have like the shelf life they once did, and you kind of are forced to get it right, or early on, or not at all.
That's a great point.
Yes.
So Discovery, now that it's in the 32nd century, It's got, maybe it'll actually like take the time to explore its setting. It didn't really do that in season 3, but I understand that they were like trying to set up a lot of stuff and trying to resolve a couple of plot threads from season 2. That's fine. Discovery now has the opportunity to go to Navarre. It looks like they are at least going to incorporate Tarina, the president of Navarre, into season 3 or season 4 in some capacity. Picard has the opportunity to delve more into Seven of Nine's backstory and to maybe flesh out the world of the now 25th century. But, if these shows are like traditional Star Trek shows, they wouldn't really be taking advantage of their settings or the world until well into their run. It's just like, we just like have these high expectations for these shows because we're used to television being little mini movies that work pretty well right from the get-go, or we don't watch them.
What show did that for you first? Like where you were like, oh, this show's like from the start to the end, like pretty close to flawless.
Gosh, I mean, Mindhunter, The Mandalorian.
The Mandalorian. Generally speaking, though, it's shows that have like anthology seasons. Like if you take a True Detective, like True Detective season 1 is impeccable and flawless. It's like a masterpiece. But then it doesn't have like the kind of trap of needing to go on for like 7 seasons. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's only got 1 season to really, so they can write it from beginning to end, really polish it, and then they can deliver it.
Yeah, For All Mankind, I think is and it's.
I have to watch that. So many people are telling me to watch that.
Yeah, I have to watch it too.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the perfect hybrid between traditional TV and like the new, more anthology-esque model. It's got it follows generally the same group of characters, but over the course of a couple of decades. So you skip over like huge swaths of storytelling, but you don't need to see how everybody got from A to B to C. If the characters are interesting and like that, if it makes sense or it creates these
kind of what Vikings
stories.
did at some point. If you guys have seen Vikings. Watched it. I'm thinking now, so bringing it back to character arcs, do you like the shows that we have nowadays, considering the seasons are much shorter, maybe it's unfair to judge them the same as like Voyager or DS9 or TNG, because I feel like they have just less room to expand on like the little personal, interactions, the little details that make the characters kind of grow and make them who they are. Like everything that a character has to do on one of these shows kind of has to be plot driven. Like even Detmer's struggle and the PTSD and everything that she was going through in this season of Discovery, that was all like linked to the plot itself and to how everyone's feeling homesick or kind of coming to terms with what they've done. So maybe that has like an impact on character arcs as a whole.
Yeah, I've thought about that myself. I'm often trying to excuse Discovery for its sketchy character work. I mean that is a reason. I don't think it's a great excuse though.
Boom.
Going back to Spock for a second, whether he counts in this discussion or not, one thing I really love is that, again, unintentional arc, or let's just say like accidental arc, is that Spock kind of is the character that is Star Trek. Like his arc is Star Trek. Like he starts out in the original series. He even he dies in another universe where we kind of like reboot Star Trek a little bit. Like the whole, like he influences a whole new gang of the TOS crew. It's like, it's weird. It's a weird, cool, that's a sci-fi crazy thing too. And so and now with him on Discovery, I feel like there's this arc that you can form. I know it's not like an intentional arc, but I just like it. I like the story of Spock.
Is it dangerous though to play that game where you have, be it intentional or not, you have a Spock kind of life that's been established? Is it dangerous to go back in there and try to like fill in blanks? Do we need those blanks necessarily filled in?
For me, it worked well in Discovery. Like, at first I was a little reticent, but I really enjoyed seeing Lumberjack Spock, or like that's what I call him. But like seeing Spock in this like kind of vulnerable state in his life, and like also discovering his relationship with Burnham, that was really cool. And then it like just makes sense knowing Spock in his later years and just how private he is in general. Like it makes sense that he never would have said anything about Burnham, and plus the classified thing, it all worked out really like really delightfully, I guess is the word for me.
Not for me. I really like Lumberjack Spock. I like Ethan Peck as Spock. I have difficulty connecting his Spock to Leonard Nimoy or Zachary Quinto.
I agree. That's something that I said it on my videos. I'm waiting for Ethan Peck to give us. I know that each actor wants to do their own thing, because if you're just impersonating the actor that came before you, it's kind of soulless to some certain extent. But I'm waiting for him.
But that's why Zachary Quinto is brilliant. He doesn't really impersonate Leonard Nimoy,
Calvin
but he does.
Spock. That's a different character.
No, but but I'm saying like he does evoke Spock. It's weird, yeah.
He's too human that he is Vulcan. He's more human than he is Vulcan. I feel like that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm waiting for Ethan Peck to give us like the uniform Spock, like the bridge Spock that we saw in
at the end
original
of
series.
Yeah, hopefully in Strange New Worlds, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's a good point. We never see Spock really doing Spock stuff in Discovery or the short treks. It's all pre sitting there on the bridge of the Enterprise Spock. But I don't want to be one of these people who who says, well, Spock never mentioned his sister and Sarek never mentioned adopting a human or any of that, so it didn't happen. But for me personally, it does seem so inconsistent with things that, had been already established that it's hard for me to look at Discovery and feel that that's a cohesive early Spock, then TOS's, middle Spock. And then, there's a disconnect there for me, story and actor wise, and it just doesn't gel yet.
We'll see how Strange New World handles that. Strangely enough, it's one of the things that I like, the whole Sarek, Burnham, Spock kind of storyline. That's one of the things that I enjoyed the most, and for like what the Discovery's delivered so far, I have less trouble kind of connecting those dots than I have just connecting the entire aesthetic of the show. And again, the same way you don't want to be one of those dismissive of Burnham's kind of existence, I don't want to be dismissive of like Discovery's aesthetic and, they should have done the Klingons right, etc., etc. But I feel disconnected in that sense.
I just honestly need it to be an alternate reality. It makes sense to me that
Spock didn't mention her.
Sorry.
Yeah, kinda.
That's the case I always make. Or at least
that's
just
that's what you said in those season 1 reviews that we were doing.
Well, I always just said like just say it's a reimagining. No one will care anymore. Like once you say that, like it's a reimagining or it's like whatever.
Yeah, come out and say it.
Say it, and then then people will stop trying to fit it into this box that they're all trying to fit it into. Like I was even trying to fit in. I mean, I make the weirdest leaps of logic to try to connect Discovery to the original series. But yeah, so if you just say it's a reimagining, then people can move on and focus on the show. I think those people like me who are obsessed with like things like lining up and stuff.
Yeah, and this is an old topic.
So what about Lower Decks?
What about it?
Oh, sorry.
I'll just finish the thought and then we'll talk about Lower Decks.
Go.
It's an old conversation. Oh, Discovery doesn't fit with the canon of TOS, or it doesn't quite align. But
that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying the visual continuity specifically.
It's not just the visual continuity, though. It's the story continuity. It's the character continuity. I mean, I'm sorry. It just doesn't quite work. It's
canon bending.
Right.
Like it's not. They haven't broken canon in a sense, but because breaking canon is something that kind of doesn't really exist. It's like you're creating canon every time you make something. It's just that now we have to really bend it and make it fit. To weave it together.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a canon breaker. I use continuity or official instead. But sorry, finish your thought.
I never should have used the word canon to begin with. It's just like a hot button. It's like a trigger word. But I just think 4 years in, if we're still having this conversation, they clearly haven't done a good enough job making Discovery jibe with the rest of the franchise, and they should do something about it.
Right.
Oh, wow. I am very this is the first time I've actually heard someone say that, other than like me to myself. So
you're so sheltered.
You clearly haven't been on the angriest parts of the internet.
Hey, look, and I'll say this, by the way, if you follow me and if you listen to me and if you're with me on Twitter and you retweet something from like the Hate Squad or whatever it is, then you are the only reason why I know they exist, because none of them are ever on my feed. You know what I mean? I'm not just talking
Wow,
to you
it's like
guys. I'm talking to like people that are listening to me.
yeah,
But
it's a very like strong.
I've never seen. I don't see any of the
My
videos,
filters are
any of
walls
the
7 feet
tweets.
high. No tweet shall get through.
None shall pass.
None shall pass.
No, usually when I see like harsh criticism or very like despicable tweets, it's because they've been retweeted by someone that's angry about
but
that
I don't
tweet,
think
not the
that we're
tweet
talking
itself.
about. I don't think we're talking about that even. I think we're just talking about like the moderate Trekkie who kind of like has seen all the shows minus Voyager and is paying attention to like what there's a feeling or a vibe that you're
It's
supposed to
that
hit.
certain promise that they had in like that old promise that they said, oh, we'll make everything fit by the end of the season, and then they say that every season. You know what I mean?
Well, I feel like this is the thing like that occurred is that like we're in a whole new era of like feedback, right? In TV. Like before you had letter writers, of course, and you had people like you'd run into if you're known and if you're a known producer and they ran into you in the street, someone would tell you their piece of their mind or whatever. But today, like there's so many points of data or information that like come directly to the creators from various sources. Like I spend a lot of my time on Twitter, but there's YouTube, there's Facebook, there's like Facebook groups, there's all kinds of places. There's like Instagram, like there's so much telemetry coming into people creating shows. So they made this decision, and it's pretty like clear that like there was so much like confusion, hatred, drama, whatever about Discovery being set when it was and being like kind of what was happening is they're like, we want to get away from this completely. Let's go like as far into the future as possible so we can have a chance at like telling our story without like without all this like weight of like information. And so I think they've done that, like Paul was saying earlier. And so season 4 is going to be interesting to see like what happens next. This will be, I think, a new threshold for that team. Picard like has less
We
of
don't need
that.
another threshold.
No, we don't.
Sorry.
They did the warp. They passed warp 10 and they ended up in the 32nd century.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like that's the difference today is that like you just have so much telemetry about what you're creating that like it changes the game altogether.
So what I was going to say about Lower Decks is I feel like even though they've only had one season and it's a very short season, they are the new show that has handled character arcs the best. And I know the show is also still in its infancy. We haven't seen too much about these characters and they still have a lot of room to grow. But yeah, I feel like Boimler and Mariner in particular grew a lot in that first season, and I'm pretty impressed with how that came out.
Well, you can't compare it to Worf, but yeah, I would feel like yeah.
Well, excuse me.
I would feel like yeah. Lower Decks in general, I think, is like a surprising show for me because I didn't expect it to be as fun and good as it is.
I hear what you're saying. I'm struggling to really identify a character arc for these guys. But I will say that their characterization is consistent throughout. The first season in a way that like intertwines with the sci-fi or silly Star Trekky story that they're telling. That like their character traits play into the stories. So rather than dealing with like their personal life aside from their Starfleet life, all of that is very intertwined on Lower Decks, and that makes interesting character work. I can't say that Boimler. I mean, like Boimler really doesn't change that much in season 1, does he? I mean,
I think for
I feel like he
Mariner's
does.
Mariner's like a strong yes on that one because she starts out. I think because we find out about her past and because it's an establishment of an arc. All of them, I would say, is that because really like again these are ongoing shows so we don't have the benefit of saying like oh yay when the show finished like this was the arc that they laid down, but I would say that they're establishing an arc and Mariners seems like the one that I can see most clearly, like I can see the end of that rainbow. And then Boimler I would say I could kind of see where they're taking him, but he's not as interesting as Mariner is to me. I like Boimler because he reminds me of myself in many ways, but Mariner's the character that I'm like watching her story and I want to see how it ends and so on and so
yeah, and I would say
I feel
of
like
the modern shows, Picard is the one that I mean, obviously it's the most character focused, but it's the one with the most successful character arc for Picard, my opinion.
Which
for
one?
Picard.
Yeah,
for Picard himself, yes.
Oh wow. Okay.
I mean, it's I mean, the show is almost entirely focused on bringing him from, retired Picard, who is out of touch with reality in a lot of ways, to closer
to back in the game.
back closer to the character that we knew from TNG, while still being
it's
a new
redemption,
man.
a redemption renewal story.
Yeah.
Oof. I feel like most of like the arc that we saw of like Picard himself is kind of based in the flashbacks than what happens in present day. I feel like he's just kind of like along for the ride for most of the season.
No, the flashbacks help to like enrich that, but I think like when we start the show out, he's
he's a bitter old man. This is what they want to show you.
Not necessarily bitter. You're a little bitter. You're right, but he's like, it's interesting because it picks up like right before this interview that he hasn't. So you do have to learn a lot about the last 20 years through like exposition or through flashbacks. But I would say that like from the point where we start, it's very easy to kind of hop in and say like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Like, if such and such things happen that they've established through dialogue, then you could see why Picard would have ended up in this spot and he would have left Starfleet, and he would, it all just like kind of like it makes sense. And then so like this by the end of the season or the end of the series, like we want to get that person back. We want, not just Picard the captain or the great leader, but Picard who enjoys archaeology and all the things that life needs to come back to this character who's kind of dead, which is I don't know.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about those flashbacks is it's almost like Picard was living his best life in the story between the stories, like after Nemesis and before Picard, which is kind of a weird kind of a weird thing to do to the character. But
considering he never really liked the Vineyard, from what I remember.
Well, what I'm saying is like when he was on the Verity with Raffi, that seems to be when he was going down to Vashti,
rescuing Romulans.
Yeah, like
yeah.
Like that was Picard at his most well-adjusted. He liked children.
The crew post TNG is the crew that he enjoyed the most and the missions that he loved the most.
Maybe
not necessarily. And not just necessarily that, but like maybe he like reached a level of like, when it's like graduating from high school, you spend like 4 years with the same people, and then when you go off to college, there's a whole new set of people, and like it's not like that one thing is better than the other, but it is kind of because you're growing and you're progressing, and so he's doing things. I mean, like you freaking saved.
He's at peak Picard, but he doesn't have the vulnerability of being seen when he wasn't yet peak Picard. Like his crew. You guys know what I mean, or no? Does that not make sense?
I'm totally
like during
lost.
TNG, he's still growing, so everyone's seen him when he wasn't yet.
Well, you suggest
the
that
best.
You suggest that one stops growing at some point and they're just perfect. It's like, no, I don't think
no, that's not what I mean. But what I mean is like he's achieved like a certain level of confidence.
Sure. Okay, I see
once he's done his mission on the Enterprise D&E.
Right.
And then he gets this new ship and this new crew, and so he comes with that confidence, and they don't see him grow in that sense. Like he's already there, he's already prepared.
I think it's more of like, how can I do this without these guys? And then he does it. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's like that kind of a story, because it's like when you're so connected, like, like they could almost read his mind, like his crew, you know what I mean? And then to leave that and then start a new endeavor aboard the Verity and become like, an admiral and all that stuff. Like there must have been this like moment where he wondered, like, will I be able to do this? Can I? Well, he kind of fails, but still he does do it. He does go on and do these other things. And Rafi's an interesting character because you can tell he really cares for her, and they had like some kind of close bond. So yeah, it'd be nice to visit that 20-year time period actually.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned Raffi, that they seem to have a closer, more personal relationship than he had with Riker. And obviously she's the only character from his in between years that we can really, gauge Picard off of. But, she says she loves him in the finale, and, he kind of does his usual gruff Picard response to that at first, but it's almost like there's like a hint of romantic love between them, which obviously wasn't the case with Riker. Like Riker's an old pal, an old colleague, but there's Raffi's either, you know, a potential love interest, or I mean, like I don't want to get weird here, but like maybe a daughter type. But maybe like, there's a deeper bond between the two of them. In my
maybe it's as simple as that lesson that he learned in All Good Things, which is, you know, you can still be friends with your crew, I guess, because he kind of shatters that distance by sitting down at the poker table. Maybe he took that on to his new ship with his new crew, and instead of kind of keeping that distance, because he always kept that little distance with Riker, maybe with like Raffi and the other people he never did, and he just embraced his friendship with them,
which made his quitting that much more devastating to Raffi.
Devastating, yeah. I definitely see that there's a different kind or a deeper closeness with Raffi. I don't know about romantic, but well, maybe because he lets her call him JL. Like that seems like something, you know, people were like, "Oh, JL, I hate that," because we're kind of conditioned to think that he just wants to be Jean-Luc Picard or Jean-Luc, or, you know, like that's how he always like kind of referred to himself. And so to hear this new like nickname, yeah, there's like there's an intimacy there that
I had canon that he puts up with that. That's
I think he's fond of it after so many years. I think he likes it, and I think he likes that Raffi challenges him in ways that like that the others did not. Like, you know, kind of, I guess Counselor Troy comes close, but, you know, Raffi, I think, is deep. She cuts deeper. And yeah, and I can see the case for like some romance there, or some romantic feelings at the very least.
Boy, did Picard have a way of just ignoring Troy. You know, she would often give him sound counseling advice, and he would just tell her to go fuck off. So, you know, and she'd get mad.
He literally tells her a nemesis to keep getting raped for the good of the crew. So gosh. He's like, you know, whatever. I have to go back to Boimler for at least just a second, just to like save. I don't know if it's his honor or my opinion. Yeah. I feel like Boimler went from being a very by the book person that wants to follow all of these rules that don't necessarily make sense when you're dealing with like first contact rules, because they're very, you know, strange, to like he grow, not only does he grow in confidence, but he also grows to understand that Mariner doesn't always follow the rules exactly, but what she's doing is for the good of the people, and ultimately that is the Federation or like Starfleet's true goal. It's to help and to like spread kindness, dare I say. And so I feel like it's kind of, in a sense, commentary on the Federation itself or Starfleet itself, and that's where he grew for me. And I feel like that was very good to do in only such a short amount of episodes.
But I think his story is still, in that sense, he's still going to be growing in that same respect, because I think he kind of thinks, for me, I think Boimler hasn't changed much. Again, it's hard to discuss character arcs with shows that are ongoing, especially one as virginal as Lower Decks is, fresh. But what I will say is that, like, for me, Mariner's arc seems the furthest along of all the other characters.
Which got the most screen time, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Because like you take someone like Rutherford, I think he had, you know, the small arc that they gave him was kind of just taken away by the fact that they took away his memory.
If you really want to be hardcore, we shouldn't have included any of the new shows in your discussion. We have to re-record everything, not including any ongoing shows, only completed shows. And then I couldn't even
who got any type of arc in Enterprise?
Someone said on Twitter, someone said on Twitter, someone said Hoshi had a solid arc
early on. Yeah, she did. She was annoying early on, unfortunately, and she became not annoying later on. But to Paul, for sure.
That's a win.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if you go from annoying to not annoying,
it's basically the best host she got, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, Hoshi and Travis kind of, you know, they didn't get their due in that show.
Because they could have, but I mean, it's only 4 seasons, but still, they got canceled. But
in 4 seasons, they could have given the 2 non-white characters something to do.
It's true. I agree. Thank you.
They're just they're interesting characters, and they could have I feel like they were the youngest actors, and maybe like the actors with the least experience, because the vibe I get, and I'm not trying to shit on them at all, it's just the vibe I get is when I'm watching the show, I feel like they're the ones that kind of underperform in certain instances. But if they really challenged them and gave them those stories, I'm sure they could have really driven that talent out of them.
Yeah, to Paul's arc, I would say is even more. It's probably more clear and defined than Archer's.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what Archer's arc really is.
Yeah, like
well, his arc is essentially becoming the president of the United Federation of Planets. That's his arc, but then we don't see that. We kind of gloss over how that happens.
Was he President Archer eventually? Yeah. Is that what happens? Okay.
Well, in the holodeck simulation that Riker's playing, he gives a speech.
But that's not his presidential speech, is it? I thought it was just
Yeah, it is.
Oh, I didn't get that. How did I not get that? I just watched
He's the first president of the United Federation.
That was not my read.
Well, you didn't get that because they didn't do that.
Yeah, that was not my read.
It's not your fault.
But I thought the only reference to Archer being president is on a screen in A Mirror Darkly, where Mirror Archer's reading about the Prime counterpart's fate.
Oh no! I thought it was his inaugural speech that he was going to read. For like they create the Federation, and when they create it, they need a president, and so he's the one. Because his arc is bringing all of these species together, the Andorians and the
Enterprise. That's not really his arc.
Yeah, his arc. Yeah, I would say no. Again, he doesn't really. He kind of goes in a weird. I guess he never got back to he never had a true arc. I guess
his biggest arc is getting angry in the Expanse.
Yeah,
but in the 4 seasons that we get, T'Pol definitely goes from one place and ends in another. Like her story is very clear and very defined, and she goes through the most. I feel like her character, she got the most definition, if you will.
Neelix got a big arc, even though everyone hates him.
What was his arc? I don't know yet, so tell me.
Oh no, maybe he did. Maybe he got the same arc as Hoshi. He went from annoying to not as annoying.
Oh, gotcha.
Wait, when did that happen? Because I didn't. I don't know when Neelix became less annoying.
No, he goes from annoying to kind of cute once he manages to make Tuvok dance. Is that it?
I haven't seen. I kind of don't pay attention to Neelix. I hate to say this.
Oh my god.
But he's all right. He's just there. He cooks. Sometimes he's funny.
That's his arc. He's there, and then at one point he's not there. Spoilers.
Sometimes he's I think of Neelix as this weird product that was occurring. I think of him as a Jar Jar.
Oh my god, I knew you were going to say that.
And I love the actor who plays Jar Jar. I'm just saying, and I love Ethan Phillips.
Ethan Phillips is amazing, but Neelix unfortunately was written terribly. I mean, from the get-go, they made him so unlikable, and also the whole kiss thing is just too weird.
Yeah, it is pretty weird.
Well, yeah, that's a bit cringe, I suppose. In those early seasons to watch that, the whole Tom Kiss Neelix thing, I didn't like that.
So you completionists, what's the best story arc in Voyager? What do I have to look forward to? Is it Janeway?
I actually think it's Tom and B'Elanna's relationship.
Really?
I think the best story arc in Voyager isn't necessarily
character arc. I should say.
Okay, then let's say Seska.
Dear Lord.
No, I think the Kazon story arc in Voyager's 2nd and 3rd seasons is the best that the show actually got, unfortunately, or at least the most consistent. And Seska plays a huge part in that, though. I wouldn't call her.
You like the Kazon? I think the Vidians are much more interesting as characters or as a species.
They are, but they're not used the way the Kazon were. If they swapped the Kazon or the Vidian for the Kazon, or any other, the Kazon are not very interesting. But the story that they tell about the Kazon trying to capture Voyager,
the Klingons with big hair.
I mean, I've heard that before. The makeup looks a little bit like it, and maybe if they didn't look so Klingon, people would like them a little bit more. But anyway, I mean, I could go on about the Kazon, but I have unpopular opinions about Star Trek.
But that's fine. That's good.
They're rare opinions, not unpopular.
Sadly, though, I'm going to have to cut this a bit shorter than usual. Usually we run on for an hour.
Did we offend you or something? What happened? Oh, you have to leave?
Yes, absolutely. No, I got to go because I got to put baby on the tube to bed. So
you made it past 45 minutes. That's a solid podcast.
Yeah, that's what I think. That is, I was thinking as long as we run past the 45-minute mark, we're good.
See, I just felt I was just getting started here. I was just getting revved up.
I know. I was like, I thought this was gonna be a 3-hour tour myself because
we can come back for a part 2 if you guys want. I got no problem with that.
Come back for a part 2 where we actually address the topic.
I will just say I am looking forward to completing Voyager, and I think 7 of 9 is probably going to be very interesting. And I agree with Paul that the most interesting story arc, at least the most if you still say so, is Worf, the most defined and like clear story arc.
Well, I didn't say overall, but that's the one that stands out to me, especially
out
from the early days.
I can't think of another since you pointed out, so I'm like hard pressed. I was using Spock.
Well, you know, it's funny because I was sitting there thinking before we started talking, like, who never got an arc? And it's like Riker barely got an arc, if anything. You know,
just exists.
Oh my gosh,
his arc is being the husband of Deanna.
Yeah. And, like, I love Riker, but like he doesn't really go through anything. He's just always Riker.
Riker.
I mean, I'm gonna finish on like a bombshell here. Data barely gets an arc. Like he doesn't get an arc until he does the sacrifice to become, and that kind of makes him human.
Another reason why Picard is awesome.
But before that, like even if he has moments where he's creating his daughter, that kind of stuff, like he doesn't have like a fully fledged out arc.
I know you're cutting the show, but I think you're wrong. I do think Data has more of an arc than Riker, and I think there's a lot of stuff, but we'll talk about it in part 2.
Okay.
I mean, if you guys are game,
I'm game.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk about Ezri Dax.
Yeah, there's so many arcs to talk about.
There is. This is a big topic. Okay. I feel less guilty about cutting this short then. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you guys back in part 2. We'll organize when we can do that. Thank you guys for being with me. Thank you everyone for listening along. Hopefully you'll tune in for the unexpected part 2 where we actually talk about the topic. No, I think we did a good job about talking.
We did. All right.
Live long and prosper.
Thanks for having me on.
Bye.